OMG, OMG, OMG. Yes, yes. That was all I heard through the silent screams. Her thighs were wrapped around my head like she was trying to make my eyes pop out. I think I should start at the beginning. It was Friday, February 14th. I was enjoying another evening at my beloved restaurant, Defenders. Years ago, the establishment had a poor reputation as the former owner could not, or refused to, care for the customers. That all shifted in one night when an elderly couple was being tormented by a truly obnoxious trio I called the Three Stooges. The couple was being pestered by these fools who were rudely bothering them, while the owner and his staff relaxed to savor their nightly entertainment. The owner, being in his late 20s, perhaps early 30s, was simply too immature to manage the establishment. I had witnessed enough and intervened to protect the couple from suffering any further harm. It took under a minute, and the Three Stooges were being hauled out of the restaurant as the patrons applauded. The couple threatened the proprietor with a lawsuit. After an intense argument about the administration of the restaurant, it was resolved that it would be transferred to the couple. Well, sort of. It was just after 8 p.m. when the band began setting up. They weren't a terrible band, but you wouldn't count on them achieving fame. The locals gather at the restaurant every weekend and they handle a respectable amount of business during the week. Being that it was Valentine's Day, the place appeared to have more couples than usual. I have been coming to this restaurant for many years now, and I recognize the entire staff. I primarily come for the food, but stay and tip them generously for their service. I don't drink much, only a couple of beverages per visit on average. However, many of the patrons drink excessively and stagger like spaghetti when they leave. So there I was, solo on yet another Valentine's Day. Ever since my wife, Brandy, passed away, I made it a priority to avoid scheduling any romantic outings for that day. Anyway, I was observing people while playing trivia on one of the large screens when I noticed one of the patrons having difficulty with another customer. The woman was alone, minding her own business and gazing at the door as though she was waiting for someone. Several minutes passed before she ordered from the menu. She seemed uneasy, tense, eating small bites and looking up each time the door opened. She finished her dinner unaccompanied. She dabbed at the corners of her rosebud lips with her paper napkin before offering a slight nod and courteous smile to the waitress. I could not help but observe her. The sparkle of her eyes, the flush of her cheeks, her beauty was captivating. I could only wonder what sort of fool would stand this woman up. One of the intoxicated men was attempting to flirt with the woman and was being rejected for his clumsy efforts. He didn't understand when no meant no. I have seen this countless times over the years and did what I would do for any woman in trouble. I sprang from my table and crossed about 20 feet in 07 seconds. I grabbed the guy firmly by the arm and pulled him back as he stumbled, clearly in no shape to continue bothering the woman. The bouncer was only a few seconds behind me. Together, we guided the man toward the door as he muttered incoherently. Marvin got one arm around his shoulder, and I did the same as we guided him outside, while Margie called a taxi for him. Marvin commended me for a job well executed and once again proposed I take a job. I chuckled as I replied, "You can't afford me," as I always did. Margie quickly expressed her gratitude and told me dinner was on her as she had done numerous times before, with a wink and a nod. Margie, her spouse Hank, and I became close friends after our initial confrontation with the Three Stooges. When the current proprietor of the restaurant tossed out a figure to sell the bar, I said, "Done." Margie and Hank stared at me like I was insane. We scheduled the date to transfer ownership a week later. I invited Margie and Hank to my residence to finalize the details. I explained to them what I perceived as the opportunity in the business. Hank was ex-military with expertise in feeding thousands of troops. Margie had experience waiting tables in her earlier years, then she transitioned to management 10 years ago. By the way she spoke to the owner about his leadership style, I realized that she was in management. Margie and Hank voiced their worries about buying the restaurant, the primary concern being that it would exhaust them financially, and they were hesitant to put all their resources into one basket. Being in their mid-50s, they had worked hard to plan their retirement and were well on track. I alleviated their fears by telling them I could be a silent partner and they could retain most of their savings. I just needed to know they were dedicated to running the place. With 20% of their savings being invested by Hank and Margie, I knew they would do an excellent job. With the financial part resolved, I went on to recount my various encounters with the restaurant, over the many times I'd ventured into the jungle, as I referred to it. I told them I was weary of the way the restaurant had been managed and wanted a safer venue for people to enjoy themselves. As 6 a.m. arrived, Defenders was created. As I was making my way back to my table, I observed the woman in tears. I made a detour to her table to ensure she was all right. "Are you injured, young lady?" I inquired. "No, I'm fine," she squeaked out. "If you are fine, why are you crying?" I pressed further. "Nobody has ever stood up for me like that," she said with a sob. "Glad to be of assistance, ma'am," I responded with my best southern drawl. That got a chuckle out of her as she wiped her tears away. "My name is Jones, Mike Jones," I said, trying to imitate James Bond. That one brought a grin to her face. I had not seen this woman grin since she walked in. "You should grin more often, young lady. I would have invited you to dine with me had I known it would brighten up the room." "Damn, you're corny. Is that the best you've got?" she said in a playful manner. "Hell no, I get much cornier as the evening progresses," I replied instantly. Now she was really laughing. "I'm Mindy Johnson. Thank you for assisting me with that guy." I know a heartfelt thank you when I hear one. "No problem. It happens occasionally here on the weekends. Marvin knows he can rely on me, and the owner has given me permission to help maintain the peace. Would you care to join me for a drink? A tiger like yourself shouldn't be solo in this jungle," I said, sounding as corny as possible. That brought another grin. I was beginning to genuinely enjoy my evening. Of course I would. I was supposed to meet up with a guy from this ridiculous Cupid dating site, and surprise, surprise, a no-show. "A queen such as yourself will never find a proper match on such platforms, my lady," I said as I inclined my head. "You really do get cornier as the night continues, don't you?" In all seriousness, I told her that I embrace being corny. "It works for you, not for many, but you are owning it. I dub thee the king of corny." It was my turn to crack up. I escorted her to my table and pulled her chair out. She looked at me as though I was from another planet. She took her seat, but I could not tell if she appreciated my old-fashioned ways. Margie was at our table. "Let me apologize, ma'am. We do our best to make sure our guests are well taken care of." Margie continued with, "Flash Gordon here is our super-secret superhero." "I noticed," Mindy said with a grin. "Are you sure you're all right?" Margie asked once again. "Yes, I am, now that I'm enjoying a Friday evening for once." "Well, your dinner is complimentary. Would you like something to drink?" said Margie. "Yes, barkeep," I replied. "The lady would like Coke and I will—" Margie interrupted me. "Yes, Flash, you will have your Coke too." Margie rolled her eyes and told Mindy she would return with our drinks. I excused myself and went to the restroom. Margie was on her way with our drinks. As I passed her, I said, "Don't tell her any falsehoods about me." Margie chuckled and continued to our table. "Margie, what's the scoop on this guy?" Mindy inquired. "Oh, honey, I need to sit down for a long while if you want the whole story." Margie took my seat and filled Mindy in on some of my background, lifestyle, romances, and painted me as some saint. I took my time knowing some of the tales she might be telling Mindy, not all the tales about maintaining the peace in the restaurant. And I especially don't care to hear about taking a woman into my home because she was homeless. That one has a bitter ending to it, but I truly was trying to assist. As I walked back to my table, Margie loudly announced what a jerk I was and walked off. "I guess I went from being Flash Gordon to Ming the Merciless," I muttered. Mindy was laughing her head off. "You can't help it, can you?" I wasn't sure if she was being serious or not, so I replied, "I am what I am," in my best Popeye voice. "You are full of surprises, aren't you, Mr. Gordon?" Mindy said in a somewhat serious tone. "All jokes aside," I replied while Mindy nodded. "I'm just a guy who likes to enjoy life, and sometimes I do things to make sure that I can." "And that homeless woman?" Mindy asked cautiously. "How could I enjoy my life knowing this woman needed help, that I had the resources to help, yet I refused to help?" I truthfully replied. We sat for about an hour and chatted. Boy, did we chat. We touched on everything from religion to politics to money. The big three people these days really don't want to discuss. I found out that Mindy and I shared similar opinions on the first two, but she seemed to care less about wealth. I, on the other hand, viewed money as a way to enjoy life, even if that meant assisting people I didn't know. The band had been performing some of the usual tunes they typically play. Like I said, they were talented, but never going to be celebrities. They slowed it down and began playing. You're just too good to be true, can't take my eyes off of you. You be like heaven to touch, I want to hold you so much. I jumped up out of my seat like I got zapped and announced, they're playing our song. Mindy started giggling so hard I thought she was about to wet her panties. I extended my hand and said, "May I have this dance, ma'am?" The look on her face went from one of pure joy to maybe disbelief. "You're serious, aren't you?" Mindy asked. "Jones, Mike Jones, or did I not introduce myself already? Who is this guy, Sirius? Was he your companion for the night?" I replied. "You are my companion, Jones, Mike Jones," she said as she extended her hand to mine. When our hands met, it felt like I got shocked with a damn taser. "Holy moly, Mindy, you really know how to grab a guy's attention." "You, sir, have my complete attention," she replied in a teasing tone. I led her to the dance floor and we started to move rather closely. I told her I thought she was going to wet her panties earlier. She leaned in closer, put her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm not wearing any panties." "If you didn't think you had my complete attention before, I'm sure you know you do now," I whispered back. I pulled her tighter, and as we continued to sway to the music, our bodies became one on the dance floor. As the song ended, Mindy knew my dilemma and spun around while keeping my arms around her. She guided us back to our table, where I pulled her chair for her and she sat down. Margie brought us another round without saying a word. She did, however, give me the look that indicated she approved. Her opinion meant a great deal to me. Margie is a very good evaluator of character, and we seem to recognize good people when we meet them. Mindy said, "Are you trying to get me intoxicated to take advantage of me?" "Yes, ma'am, I am," I replied in feigned defiance. "Mr. Gordon, would you like to hear a secret?" "Heavens, no," I replied. "Loose lips sink ships." "It's a good thing I don't have loose lips then, right?" Mindy responded, dripping with innuendo. "You can sink my battleship any time," I replied. With that last remark, Mindy took it literally, or wanted to test my word as she reached under the table and fondled my zipper. Mindy looked directly into my eyes with more desire and determination than any woman had ever shown me and said, "Any time?" "I say what I mean and mean what I say, my dear," I responded sincerely. "So what's the secret?" I asked her, making sure she knew I was genuinely listening to her. Mindy told me that she would love nothing more than to make love with me right here. I said we head to the walk-in freezer. She said, "I don't think you would enjoy a frozen river between my legs." I grabbed her hand and headed for the door. With a wave of my hand to Margie, we were out the door. I pulled Mindy and spun her around so she was against the wall as we made our way around the side of the restaurant. Our kiss started off slow and cautious but turned into an inferno of lust. I kissed from the nape of her neck to behind her ear. I grabbed a handful of hair and directed her lips towards mine where our tongues playfully dueled with each other. Her hand rubbed my pants and I responded in kind. I slowed down and whispered in her ear, "Would you like to come home with me?" A silent nod was her reply. We went to my 1967 Shelby. I opened the door for her while she pulled her dress up to her waist. I saw her butt. I closed the door and just about ran to my side. The way home felt like an eternity. I needed this woman in my arms, on my bed, and everywhere else. I swiftly closed the garage after I parked. I was out of my side and unlocked her door as only Flash Gordon could do. If Mindy's body was a canvas, my fingers and tongue would be the brushes used tonight. I assisted her by holding her hand. As she rose, we fell into a deep, fervent kiss. Her fragrance was alluring, and my mind was intoxicated by it. Our hands roamed over each other's bodies as my fingers began applying the initial layer of paint. Her hips felt soft yet perfectly shaped as my hands explored her rear. I lifted my right hand up her back, to the top of her neck, weaving through the tresses of hair that cascaded down her back. My left hand shifted to her lower back to pull Mindy closer to me. My right hand seized the back of her head, requesting a handful of hair. My hand tightened around the hair at the back of her head, giving me control of our kiss. Gradually, yet intentionally, my tongue was making more strokes on my canvas. I drew her head back to reveal her neck and adorned it with tender kisses while my left hand kneaded her lower back. Mindy's body showed its delight unmistakably. I proceeded with my assault. I lightly massaged her left breast while my left hand made its way south. I purposely avoided her most sensitive areas so I could enjoy watching her squirm. I picked her up in my arms and placed her on the bonnet of my car. I gently laid her on her back and looked deeply into her eyes. In one motion, I ripped her dress right down the middle. Mindy flinched, but her eyes told me to move on. She was ready for our wild ride, and I was going to make it an e-ticket ride. It wasn't a Disney e-ticket. It was an erotic ticket, and there was no comparison. Her thighs straddled my head. This wasn't really my usual operating procedure. Truth be told, it had been a long time since I'd brought anyone home. There was something about this woman that made me feel close to her, intimately close. Omg, 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 yes, yes. That was all I heard through the silent screams. Her thighs were wrapped around my head like she was trying to make my eyes pop out. I think I should start at the beginning. Mindy finally screamed at the top of her lungs, "Stop!" Of course, I had no intention of doing something she did not want. Immediately, I ceased my actions and surveyed my little muse. "Are you okay?" I asked in a serious tone. Mindy was having a hard time breathing. Her chest was rising and falling with each breath she struggled to take. It was a beautiful sight. The sheen of sweat all over her skin looked as though she had just run a marathon. After a few minutes, she proclaimed, "That was amazing." "You had me worried for a minute," I said as I picked up her limp body and brought her inside my home. She wrapped her arms around my neck and I could swear she was purring as her body seemed to vibrate. I laid Mindy down on my king-sized bed. I don't think she would have noticed if it was a bed of nails at that point. I retrieved a warm washcloth from the bathroom and began to wipe her body down, starting with her face and working my way down. A couple of minutes later, as Mindy began to lightly snore, I grabbed a light blanket to cover her up, but not before taking in the sight before me. I studied her body from head to toe. She had a petite build, stood about 5'3", and weighed approximately 120 lbs. Her measurements, I guessed at about 36 down to 24-36 with a C cup. Her hair, a light brown with some highlights that went halfway down her back. Her skin was smooth and tan, and I noted a small scar in the shape of a heart on her ribs. Her face was accented with minimal makeup that made her green eyes glow. Mindy was one of the prettiest women I had seen in some time. She reminded me of my wife from long ago. I was wildly attracted to her. I didn't want her to wake up and see this creepy guy staring at her, so I laid the blanket lightly over her. I took that as my opportunity to head back to the garage to clean up the hood of my Shelby. Man, did we make a mess of the hood. I thanked God for making Mother's wax, as the mess was easily wiped up. I have always been fascinated with a woman who could let loose. I went back into the house. I'm not in bad shape at 40 years old, but I could definitely use a regular workout partner. I stand an even 6 and weigh in at 205 lbs. I still practice martial arts to keep me in condition and ready to handle whatever life throws at me, especially at Defenders. I sat in my recliner pondering the feelings stirring inside me. I had not felt this way for many years now. I have had my share of women and never had a problem getting a date. I was married by the time I was 23 years old. With my BS in commercial real estate and commercial finance in hand, I was well underway to be able to start a family. I slept with less than a handful of women prior to that. When Brandy walked into my life on February 14th, I knew she was the one. Cupid had hit me with his arrow on the same day I was stood up by a woman I had met online. I waited for my date and ended up eating alone. A table full of women started making lewd comments to me. I was feeling uncomfortable when Brandy sat down at my table. She too had been stood up. Only an idiot would have left this beautiful woman alone on Valentine's Day. Brandy sat next to me and explained our predicament to me as she saw it. She had noticed the women and heard the comments they were making. Brandy had been waiting for an hour for her date to arrive and decided he was a no-show. She had been watching me for nearly an hour before she made her move to save me from the flock of seagulls, as she aptly named them. Needless to say, I was hooked. Brandy and I became an item. We were more than an item. We were inseparable. It was as if the cosmos had brought our souls together to complete one person. Brandy had the body of a goddess and a drive to match. We shared the same values and outlook on life, until that fateful day almost 10 years ago when my life changed forever. Unknown to me at the time, Brandy came from money, and not just a little bit. I had met her parents about a year before we were married. They had a nice house, but by the looks of it, one would not have said they were rich. I couldn't help but notice something was lacking in their relationship, especially her mother, Heather. I didn't see any communication between them other than the usual greeting and small talk. I got a very cold feeling from her in what little conversation we had. Her father, Jacob, was a bit warmer, but not by much. Technically, it was her grandmother, Grace, who had money. She lived in a ritzy neighborhood, drove an expensive car, but she never acted anything other than pleasant. Nobody would have ever guessed that she was worth $500 million, not that it would have changed my opinion of her at all. We had a great conversation the day of our wedding. Michael, I just want you to know that I had hoped Brandy would find someone to share her life with before I left this life. I'm so happy for you two. You remind me of my husband when he was young. I thanked her for her well wishes and added, I could only hope to be half the man your husband was, and I wish he could have been here. That brought a tear to her eye, and we hugged. As life always does, it moved forward. Grace passed away 5 years later. I comforted Brandy as any loving husband would do. The family had known the day would come, since an inoperable brain tumor had been found during a routine visit a year prior. Grace was a smart lady and had her financial planning in order. Her lawyers saw to it that her will was followed to the letter, and every penny made its way to where she wanted it to go. You can't imagine the amount of family that shows up when serious money is involved. What shocked me the most was who was snubbed when the lawyer read the will. From what was read, I could only imagine what Grace despised about her son, Jacob. Anyway, Brandy ended up with the bulk of the estate, with relatively minuscule amounts being given to several other family members as well as a couple of charities. Jacob ended up being given most of the family pictures, with a special set left for Brandy. I think Grace wanted to make a point to her son about what a family should hold dear. Jacob never picked up the pictures, so we kept them, even after taxes and lawyer fees. Brandy had over $300 million. Brandy and I were on our way to starting our family. We would never have to worry about money and could really focus on what we enjoyed in life. We traveled a bit. Okay, we traveled a ton, but mostly in the U.S. because people with money are major targets for kidnappers abroad. We were inseparable as ever over the next 2 years. Brandy had become pregnant during our time in Hawaii. We loved the islands and purchased a modest yet updated house just off the beach on Maui. At 16 weeks, Brandy had some complications with the pregnancy. The doctor had given us the news there could be complications further down the road and a possibility our unborn child may not make it. He went on to explain there could also be a danger to Brandy if we chose to see the birth through. He set her due date for February 14th. I thought that was a coincidence. Brandy and I did not even have a conversation about aborting our child. Neither of us could, or would even consider doing so. With the doctor's orders, Brandy and I spent the next 14 weeks at home. Brandy followed the orders without fail. I catered to her every need and kept up with the house. It seemed like we were running a bed and breakfast with the amount of people who came by, stayed a couple of days, and then left. Most notably absent were her parents. After the reading of the will, her parents walked out of the lawyer's office and never looked back. It was the last time we saw them. After a long talk with Brandy, I learned her parents had tried to take steps to seize control of her grandmother's estate. Obviously, that was a terrible thing to do, no matter what her condition was. Greed makes people do bad things. Grace had set up a trust fund for Jacob, which he and his wife spent by the time Brandy was 3 years old. She supported them until Brandy went off to college. Although Grace did pay for college, housing, and a car, she did not let Brandy know she had a trust fund at that time. Brandy loved her grandmother and called her at least every other day. She shared everything with Grace. Brandy didn't know how much she was worth and never gave it a thought to ask. A handwritten note was given to Brandy at the reading of the will. It read, "My dearest Brandy, if you are reading this, I am gone. I wish I could have lived to see my beautiful great-grandchildren. I am so happy for you and Michael. You are two hearts, pure as the snow is white. Michael is so much like your grandfather, it's uncanny. As you are aware by now, I have left you most of my estate. You will never be able to spend it all, and I doubt you and Michael would even try. However, if you value my advice, and I believe you do, please continue to use my lawyers to plan your estate. They are the best and will help guide you along your journey through life. Never flaunt your money, always treat people with respect, and do what makes you happy. You have yourself a great man to grow old with. Take care of him as I did with your grandfather, and he will take care of you. You have my love, respect, and now my money. I wish you a happy, healthy, and loving life. I love you with all my heart, Grandma Grace." Everything was progressing nicely until the day Brandy didn't wake up. I thought she was just sleeping in, as she had done many times before during the past few months. Most days she would not be up before noon. It was just past 2 p.m. when I went in to wake her up. It was time for her vitamins, and I brought her a glass of water. When she did not move, I pulled the covers off to discover the pool of blood on the bed. I couldn't breathe. Time stood still. My entire world crashed around me. I called 911 as soon as I regained my senses. It was only about a minute, but felt like hours. When the paramedics showed up, I was sitting on the front steps with Brandy in my arms. They pronounced her dead at 2:14 p.m., and a part of me died that day. Brandy's parents fought her will. I wasn't really surprised, but the lies they spewed to try to get a piece of the estate was incredible, and sad to say the least. Brandy had taken her grandmother's advice and used the same lawyers Grace had used. Boy, were they good. The entire estate was left to me. Not only were we not able to spend the money, it was growing. The lawyers submitted a letter addressed to me from Brandy as evidence. As the judge read the letter, his eyes glossed over, and I thought he was going to cry. You could see anger forming in his brow with each word he read. Her parents incurred legal fees and ended up with nothing, as the judge reprimanded them in court. It was disgusting to see her parents try to paint me as a controlling and abusive husband. I became a recluse for 3 months and decided I needed to talk with a psychologist after I had read the letter Brandy left me. 2 years later, I had finally come to accept my life. Brandy had a handwritten note for me, just as her grandmother had for her. It may have taken me 3 months to read it, but everyone grieves in their own time and heals in their own way. It was short, sweet, and full of love. It read, "Michael, my love, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. Life doesn't always work out as we would expect it to. If our child makes it and I do not, I know you will be the best father ever. If neither of us do, just always remember that I loved you with all my heart, and I expect you to love again. Michael, you are a very special man. Keep your heart pure as the snow is white, my love. Do what makes you happy. Respect others and learn to love again. I was going to tell you not to flaunt your money as Grandma had done with me. I know you would never do that. Take care of yourself, my love. Until we meet again, Brandy." As I sat in my recliner, the letter Brandy wrote me played in my head. A single tear fell from my eye as the words, "Learn to love again," kept repeating itself. "I will," I whispered to nobody in particular as I drifted off to sleep. Saturday morning, I was awoken by the amazing creature I had laid to bed. Mindy said something to the effect of, "Payback time." She smiled and continued massaging my body. Her breasts were soft and I would say perfectly proportioned for her body. Mindy proceeded to strip me very slowly. "May I have this dance, fair lady?" I requested it as cheesy as possible. "Only if you consider a lap dance a formal dance," Mindy replied. Mindy took her place upon my lap. I could see the lust in her eyes and the need in her heart. I thanked God silently for this precious gift. As we finished, she rested her head on my chest. We were both out of breath and sweating immensely. Another kiss and she was off to the bathroom. Upon her return, she had grabbed one of my t-shirts. I told her it fit like a glove even though it was almost down to her knees and hid her womanly shape. I poured us some orange juice and Mindy wanted to talk, and talk she did. "Why didn't you come to bed with me last night?" Mindy asked softly. I told her that I can't sleep with people who snore, and she was snoring loudly. She thought I was serious and started to apologize. I started giggling and she knew I was messing with her. I explained that after she fell asleep I cleaned her up so she wouldn't feel icky when she woke. I left out the part of gawking at her in her helpless position. I reprimanded her for ruining the paint on my car. She said that it was all my fault, and I should take better care of my vehicle by having a good coat of wax applied at all times. Interesting that she would say that, considering I have only heard one other woman say it before, and that was Brandy. Something strange and exciting was happening in my mind. I told Mindy that I had never seen a woman so sensitive. She told me that had not happened in many years, 8 to be exact, ever since her husband passed away. My instincts about this woman have been right every step of the way. There was something bizarre happening, but I knew this was my destiny. I went on to explain that I wasn't sure how she would feel waking up to a stranger laying in the same bed, unsure if she would feel she had been taken advantage of. That brought a smile to her face. Her smile really does light up a room. Mindy went on to tell a tale that I am unable to fathom, but I accept as the truth. Mindy and her husband had been in a terrible accident. She went on to explain the one and only scar she had on her ribs. They had both been pronounced dead. Mindy said she remembers seeing both of their bodies as she floated above the accident and into the light. Mindy claimed the warmth and love she felt was utter bliss. She claimed she was surrounded by her family, including her husband. None of them spoke, yet they were all shaking their heads in unison. A woman appeared and pulled her away. The woman told Mindy it was not her time. She remembers the woman kissing her on the forehead. Then the woman told Mindy she needed to learn to love again, as her heart is pure as the snow is white. The woman touched her ribs and she felt as though she was struck by lightning. Immediately she was back in her body, as the doctors were recording the time of death at 2:14 p.m. The doctors were baffled when they could not find anything wrong with her. Mindy had been dead for over 20 minutes. The one exception was a scar in the shape of a heart on her ribs that was not there before the accident. Her tale was not only believable, it was scary and comforting at the same time. My heart felt the pain and love of my wife all over again, and I began to cry. Mindy held me in her arms and seemed to know what I was feeling. We sat quietly for a while. I asked Mindy to come take a look at something with me. We walked into my den and I turned on the lights. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Hanging on the wall was a picture of Brandy. One look at it and Mindy could not speak. I saw her turn white as ash, and I caught her as she fainted. I was wiping her forehead with a washcloth as she awoke. You could see the wheels spinning as she tried to make sense of it all. I smiled down at her and said, "Welcome back, my love." Mindy smiled and threw her arms around me as we kissed. It all made sense to me now. Had she not recognized Brandy in the picture, I would have shown her a picture of Grace. One of those two women had communicated with her. I just wasn't sure which one. I know she is not Brandy, but I'm damn sure a piece of Brandy lies inside her, and I'm never letting her go. The signs had been there all along. February 14th and 2:14 were significant changes in my life. I thought it was a coincidence at first, but some people would say there are no coincidences. I picked Mindy up and carried her to our bed. As we lay down, I looked into her amazing eyes and said, "Happy Valentine's Day, it's good to meet you again."